When I started this channel, I was just a history teacher with a dream. A dream to flip my classroom and not have to do as much work during the day. I could just show them videos and then we could talk about it for 43 minutes or so. Never did I think I would be here, the owner of a channel on youtube.com with, as of right now, 19 subscribers. 19 subscribers, you heard that right. And right now, that means there's an opportunity for you. Well, maybe not you, you're already subscribed, but there's an opportunity for you to be subscriber number 20. I can't think of anything more you might want in life than to be subscriber number 20 to Kingdom Lyceum. So I don't like to beg for subscribers. I just want to extend that opportunity to be subscriber number 20 to some lucky fan out there. You won't get anything at all. You'll know in your heart. And that's really all that matters. Let's get into today's lesson. So if you remember to the last lesson, we've been talking about a few different things about the expansion and establishment and the growth of the original 13 colonies. Some of the things that caused these colonies to grow were the influx in immigrants with the Great Migration. Other things that caused them to grow were the development of different economies in the 3 different regions of the British colonies here in North America. Today we're going to be looking at some conflicts, and these conflicts aren't always talked about at length, and we're not going to dive too deep into them, but we're going to talk about 3 conflicts today. 2 of them are related, one of them is not related to the other 2, but all of them indicate and all of them illustrate the challenges that these new colonies were facing here in North America. All right, so conflict number 1 starts after the Great Migration in the 1630s. So if you remember the Pilgrims, they travel over 1620 Plymouth, they make it through the first winter, things were hard. They celebrate their relative success about a year later with the first Thanksgiving. It's a great time of peace and harmony between the settlers and the Native Americans that lived there. But over the next 10 years or so, you would see all these settlements and all these colonies grow and expand. In 1630, Massachusetts Bay begins, and you have this huge influx of English Puritan settlers coming into the Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island region. And the Indian tribes that live there aren't sure what to make of all this. There are some tribes that begin to ally themselves with these new settlers. There are other tribes that try to isolate themselves, or maybe they ally with other surrounding tribes. And they're not necessarily hostile towards these settlers, but there is an element of tension. Couple that tension with the interests of both the Plymouth colony and the Massachusetts Bay colony and the newly founded colony of Connecticut. All 3 of these colonies become interested in trade in the region and trying to profit off of the land that they are now settling. And you now have the recipe for a conflict between the settlers and between the natives in that region. And that conflict would be known in history as the Pequot War. So as these colonies expand, they expand further and further into what we called in the last episode the frontier. If you remember, the frontier are the westernmost regions of these colonial establishments. And the expansion of the frontier here in this part of New England is causing conflict again with the natives that are there. The Europeans are looking to privately own land. So they're claiming land, they're building fences around their land, they're farming their land. This is a new concept to the Indians here in New England. They believe the hunting ground should be open to anyone who's from that particular tribe. And now the Europeans are coming in, they're staking claims to it. On top of that, Indian crops are being destroyed by European livestock that's just wandering the region. And like we said, these tensions are about to come to a head. This war is named after the dominant tribe in that region in that time frame, and that is the Pequots. The Pequots were a tribe that you would find along the eastern coast of the Connecticut River, and they were a dominant military force, they were a dominant trading force in the region. All the other tribes look to the Pequot for leadership. Some natives that are allied with the Pequots end up killing some English colonists deep in the frontier. This murder sparks a spirit of fear in the colonists as well as a sentiment towards revenge against the Pequots. As tension and as fear grows, we see the colonies of Massachusetts Bay and the colonies of Connecticut both raise a militia. If you remember from the last few episodes, a militia is an armed force of citizens. And this militia sets out from Hartford and heads down the Connecticut River. And this militia, as they travel down the Connecticut River towards the coast, engage in hostile acts with any Indians they confront along the way. The culminating event in the Pequot War happens in what is now the town of Mystic, Connecticut. It's referred to in history as the Mystic Massacre, as this colonial militia, along with enemies of the Pequots, surround a Pequot fortified town and burn it to the ground, killing any Indians who try to escape. It's a sad story in early American history as you see the poor treatment from the English colonists towards the Native American peoples. And the Mystic Massacre, as it's known in history, is going to linger in the hearts and minds of the tribes here in New England. Okay, so after after the Pequot War, there was kind of an uneasy peace that was declared between the English colonies of Massachusetts Bay, Plymouth, Connecticut, even Rhode Island, although they kind of been doing their own thing. If you remember when Rhode Island was established, one of their focuses was having a good relationship with the Indians in their area. So anyways, all of these colonies and all of the tribes in the New England region have an uneasy peace. Tensions are still there, but both sides agree not to have conflict with each other. They engage with trade with one another, and things generally are okay. It's during this time that we see men like John Eliot and others like him begin to take the gospel to the Indians. And if you remember from our other lessons, the Indians were then encouraged, once they accepted the gospel and became Christians, they were encouraged to leave their tribe and join in a few different settlements known as praying towns. And these praying towns were places for Christianized Indians to go. Not something that's necessarily encouraged in the Bible that has strong hints of legalism, but we see here this was an effective tool in the evangelization of many Indians for the gospel. However, all of that positive work in evangelization is about to be washed away as another conflict is on the horizon here in 1675. If you remember back to 1620, the Indian chief that was at the first Thanksgiving was a man by the name of Massasoit. One of his grandsons becomes the sachem of the Wampanoag Indians in that area. His name is Metacom, but to the English he would be referred to infamously as King Philip. And Metacom was a rising star in the tribal community. He cut a strong physical figure and was actually educated in many of the tribal schools that were established by the Puritans. While he was comfortable walking amongst the English settlers, he was not one of them and he did not like them. Metacom wants nothing more than to see many of these English colonies destroyed and the settlers dispersed and leave his land. One thing that harmed the natives back in the 1630s during the Pequot War was that all these tribes were very disconnected from one another. Metacom saw that as a weakness and he begins to unite the Indian tribes surrounding the Wampanoag region. He unites them under the banner of eradicating the English colonies from their native lands. So needless to say, word is traveling that Metacom is trying to unite the tribes against the English. When word reaches the praying towns that Metacom is up to no good, one of the praying Indians that lives there goes to the Massachusetts Bay leadership and warns them that King Philip is leading a native insurrection. When confronted, King Philip declares that he has no intentions of doing this. So the Massachusetts Bay leadership says, "Oh, good, that sounds great. Sorry we asked. Have a good day." However, once the delegates from the Massachusetts Bay leave, King Philip immediately goes to the praying town and kills the praying Indian who narked on him to the governor. Not a good look, Metacom. I mean, you just said you weren't guilty. This kind of looks like you're guilty. Well, Massachusetts Bay also believes he must be guilty, and so several colonists respond to this by killing several Indians. This revenge killing is never a good idea because it always leads to greater conflicts with even more losses of life, as we see throughout human and world history. Nevertheless, we see 1675 as a year of unprecedented attacks by the natives against the English settlers here in these colonies. Most of these attacks are taking place on the frontier, so these frontier settlements are living in a constant fear, and rightfully so, of native attack. Scores of towns, we're talking in the 60s, 70s of these English settlements are being attacked by Native Americans who are now united under Metacom around the cause of getting rid of the English settlers. So at this time, we begin to see the seeds of colonial unification in something that is called the New England Confederation. The New England Confederation was the joining together of the colonies of New England in a time of war to fight against a common enemy. This common enemy was obviously King Philip and all of his tribal allies. So after about a year, the New England Confederation finally goes on the offensive. They get their act together, and so obviously their superior technology allows them to fight successfully against King Philip and his allied tribes. The fighting goes on for another 2 years, and it's an incredibly bloody time in early colonial history. Thousands of colonists and thousands of natives are killed during what is known in history as King Philip's War. Finally, in 1678, King Philip is killed in a battle in a Connecticut swamp, and this native movement then begins to fizzle out. Many natives were then continued to be killed by the New England Confederation, and many other natives were captured and sold into slavery in the West Indies. This marks the first time in history as well where Puritan English settlers are engaging in the slave trade. King Philip's War was fought on a much larger scale. It also saw a much larger casualty count than the Pequot War. Perhaps the most significant effect of King Philip's War was that it effectively ended the native way of life in New England. The entire New England region was now pretty much up for grabs for colonial establishment. It also lays the groundwork for how the United States as a whole will treat natives in the future. It's definitely not one of the brighter chapters in American history. Okay, so our first two conflicts that we studied today had a lot in common. They were both in New England. They both were between the native population and the settlers there. All right, but our third conflict is totally unrelated, and this one actually takes place all the way down in the southern colonies in Virginia. So we're heading down to Jamestown. All right, you remember Jamestown, 1607, established by the English, the starving time, John Smith, if you don't work, you don't eat. All that stuff has now passed. Jamestown is now a thriving settlement. If you remember, the cash crop tobacco was introduced by John Rolfe, and things are going pretty smoothly in Jamestown. For the rich. Many of the people who came over to the New World were not rich. They come over as indentured servants, and these indentured servants have to work for years just to get their freedom from the rich person who paid their way. Then after that, they have to move out into the frontier in order to claim land, because something called the headright system kept all the good tidewater land tied up in the hands of the rich elites in Jamestown. You have lots of frontier establishments of people who were once indentured servants and are now considered relatively poor by New World standards. And as you can guess, since they're on the frontier, they're incredibly susceptible to attack from the natives. And in several cases, many of these frontier settlers in Virginia were attacked by the natives. Their complaints and their concerns, though, fell on deaf ears at the capital in Jamestown, because Governor William Berkeley had a lucrative trade deal with the Indians that were attacking the frontier. So he didn't want to ruffle their feathers because it would affect his bottom line. Enter a man by the name of Nathaniel Bacon. Nathaniel Bacon was actually one of the richer Virginia settlers, but he had moved out into the Virginia frontier to obtain more land for his cash crops. Nathaniel Bacon did not like William Berkeley. Nathaniel Bacon did not like the threat of Native Americans. He also did not like the Native Americans very much either. And what he saw was an opportunity. After a few provoked or unprovoked attacks from the natives, Nathaniel whips the frontiersmen, the poor farmers that are living in that area, into a fervor, claiming that William Berkeley does not care about their best interest, that William Berkeley has left them out in the frontier to die at the hands of the Indians. And he gets these guys all riled up, and he takes a force of them, and he begins marching towards Jamestown. And he starts killing Indians along the way. And once he gets into Jamestown, he finds that William Berkeley has heard that he's coming and is long gone. Furious, Nathaniel Bacon and his armed mob then burn Jamestown to the ground. That's right, they burn it all. And we see that this is the first significant rebellion of settlers against the colonial government here in the New World. So Bacon and his cronies are actually in charge of the government for some time until dysentery hits. That's right, Nathaniel Bacon dies from pooping too much. I'm sorry, was that gross? I don't know. That was probably gross. I teach junior high kids, you never pass up a good opportunity for some potty humor. Sorry. But yeah, Nathaniel Bacon dies of dysentery. And once he dies of dysentery, all right, the movement kind of fizzles out. Berkeley returns to what's left of Jamestown, and Bacon's angry farmer clan returns to the frontier. However, this chapter in American history shows what happens when the common man feels that his rights are being infringed against. These poor farmers out on the frontier had actually lost their right to vote in the Virginia House of Burgesses, so they were not being represented. That was a major cause for their rebellion. They set forth a declaration of the rights of Virginiamen before they went and marched on Jamestown. And so while it was definitely a rebellion against authority that killed many innocent people and also involved the destruction of government property, it does bear some similarities to the courses that the colonists would take a few years later in the 1770s. So these three conflicts show that it was not smooth sailing in the colonies here from the get-go. However, all three of these events and others like it, as ugly as they may be, do show how these colonies are getting through these growing pains, uniting together to a certain degree. One direct result from Pequot's War and King Philip's War, and to a lesser extent Bacon's Rebellion, is that Parliament votes to remove the original charters of many of these 13 colonies, citing their lack of control, and places them under the direct purview of the king, making them all royal colonies. So again, the seeds are being planted towards conflict down the road with the mother country of England. We'll get there before you know it. Thanks for watching today. We'll see you next time. Okay, you probably missed your opportunity because I'm sure many people heard that call to action at the beginning of the video, and there's already subscriber number 20, 21, 22, dare I say 23, I don't know. However, you can still be a subscriber to Kingdom Lyceum. All you gotta do is click the subscribe button, turn on notifications, and be always learning. We'll see you later.